Hello, everyone, and welcome to lecture 26, I think, for Franklin Roosevelt and the New Deal. Today we're going to be looking at specifically the New Deal. The textbook goes into a good bit about Franklin Roosevelt himself and his election. So we're going to focus on the key points, the high points of the New Deal here. And we're going to be covering the years 1932 to 1941 in this lecture. So our 3 points today are, like I said, all going to be about the New Deal, the first 100 days of Roosevelt's presidency, also called the first New Deal, and then the second New Deal, what he does, over the course of his presidency, and then finally taking a brief look at things that happen after the New Deal, and how that affects us. So let's start off with the first 100 days here. So these are the things that Roosevelt really wanted to accomplish in his first 100 days in office that he really does. He gets down to it, and really puts his plan into motion and starts things going really quickly. And so this is a picture here, or picture of a statue here of someone listening to the radio. FDR was very famous for his fireside chats, where he would actually speak directly to the American people through radios. He would host a regular radio show where he would talk to the people about the state of the nation, about the things that he's working on, about the things he's trying to accomplish, about try to give them hope, try to give them understanding of things. And it really worked well with the American people. And that's one of the things that really made him very popular, and really helped to sustain him as a politician and as a president, was his connection to the American people here. He was able to cut through all of the red tape, basically, all the bureaucracy, all the newspapers, all of that kind of thing, and speak directly to the American people here. So what does he accomplish in his first 100 days? Well, the first thing is the United States Employment Service. He creates a whole bunch of programs. We're going to look at them briefly right here, and the textbook goes into a little bit more detail about them, but we're going to hit the high points here. One of the first departments that he creates is the United States Employment Service, which actually gives matching federal funds to local governments, local state and local governments, excuse me, state and local governments to hire people for different departments, different jobs. That if they hire people, they'll get money from the federal government for hiring their own citizens. And remember, we're in the middle of the Great Depression. Nobody has a job. The economy is in ruins. There's nobody really has a clear plan out of this except for FDR. He's the one that's really pushing this through and pushing this us towards his idea of economic recovery. And the first one is to get people jobs. You'll see it's kind of a theme as we go along here. His next thing that he puts through is the Federal Emergency Relief Act, or FERA. Which grants money to relief agencies. So when we're talking about this, we're talking specifically about like homeless shelters, food banks, medical facilities, things, that kind of relief, right? The helping people who are homeless or without jobs. Is giving them more money, giving them more streamlined service and places to pull resources from. He's going to create the Civil Works Administration, which will help to employ a variety of people, but especially to employ women. Through this program, he's going to truly expand the number of secretaries and other those types of positions in the federal government, which traditionally at this time would go exclusively to women. And so the Civil Works Administration is really going to help to push through and get more women into the workforce so that it's not just necessarily one person bringing in money to the family. He'll also create the Civilian Conservation Corps, which is going to employ and educate young men. So these are men who are right out of high school into like their mid to late 20s. And they will go and work on just these different places, national parks, forests, do these different kind of really intense, intense manual labor jobs. And while there, they'll have to live and work at the same place. So they'll have their living situation on site. Their meals will be taken care of, their clothes. And along with that, they'll also receive their education. A lot of men will go through and get their some form of college education by working through this Civilian Conservation Corps here. He'll also create the Agricultural Adjustment Act and the National Industry Recovery Act, which is two ways that he's going to help both sectors of the economy, the agrarian and the industrial sectors. Both of them are hit. Both of them are losing money. Both of them don't have enough people to work for them. And so both of these will really direct federal funds and federal services at these two economic sectors to get them back up and running. So he's really not favoring one side or the other too much. He's just trying to get everybody back to work. He'll also institute the National Recovery Administration, which is going to be an administration specifically to get us out of the Great Depression. And so their main task is going to be helping employees and getting people back to work, but also instituting reasons why people didn't want to work in the first place, right? So instituting that minimum wage, making sure that everyone has a livable wage off of that, and maximum hours, that you can't work, 23 hours of the day. That's not realistic. And so that administration is really going to enforce and create those policies across the country at this time. He'll also create the Public Works Administration, which is going to build highways, bridges, dams, really work on that infrastructure, the railroads, tunnels, things like that, canals, really going to work on that infrastructure for America, because we always had building projects. And so what do? When you have people who don't have work, you put them to build something, right? And then finally, he's going to create the Tennessee Valley Authority. This isn't the only one that he'll create, but it's the first one that he'll create, and I'll kind of follow this. And it's a specific group of people who are specifically tasked with planning and developing flood control measures and reforestation efforts throughout the Tennessee Valley, to kind of help with their natural disasters and natural resource problems at this time. So, look at the second New Deal. This is our guy over here, Governor Huey P. Long. You've probably heard about him. So Roosevelt is going to be facing major criticisms as his presidency goes on, and one of his main critics is going to be our very own Huey P. Long. Even though they have very similar ideas, and Huey tries and successfully passes very similar types of programs in Louisiana, Huey wants to be president. That's his ultimate goal. And so the main reason that he and Roosevelt are at each other's throats, and really fighting all the time, is because they both want to be president. And Huey is really kind of aggressive about wanting to be president. And so he might have been president. He might have made it at one point, if he wasn't assassinated, unfortunately. It's kind of weird to think about what life might have been like if Huey Long had gotten all the way to be president. We're also going to expand the Works Projects Administration, and so that's going to be an expansion into theater, art, music, and writing. And so employing those people and creating federally funded works of art. And so you can see a bunch of them pretty much everywhere for sure. I'm sure that LSU and maybe BRCC have some. LSU for sure does. BRCC might, I'm not 100% sure. But places like Southeastern Louisiana University and the City Park, New Orleans City Park, both have large features that are because of the Works Projects Administration. Southeastern has murals on some of their walls, and then in City Park, it's different statues and things like that. So the Works Projects Administration, you can find their stuff pretty much everywhere, and a lot of it is still around, is still shown and showcased. So keep an eye out for that, and you'll see it, everywhere you look after a little while. He's also going to create the National Youth Administration, which is going to create work study opportunities for people, and that is where we now have college work studies. It starts here with this program, having that option to work on campus and get paid by the federal government. He'll also create the Social Security Act, which we still have today, and it'll be focused on funding the elderly, unemployed, disabled, and the young people. He'll also create the National Labor Relations Act, which is going to improve labor conditions and create the National Labor Relations Board. This will be what allows us to unionize as workers without fear of repercussions. They're the ones who'll come in if a company tries to silence you. We're seeing that kind of recently with Amazon and Starbucks, and the National Labor Relations Board is the group that's in there helping to organize and call out those efforts there. And then finally, he's criticized for his Supreme Court packing plan. Now, you might hear nowadays, because ever since Roosevelt, this is kind of something that's always hung around, the idea of presidents being able to pack the court. And so what that means is expanding the court and adding justices, because presidents appoint justices in their term, right, when there's an opening. So if you expand the court and you say, actually, we're going to go from 7 justices to 9, you're the president, you get to appoint those 2 new justices. And so he was always criticized because he was at odds with the Supreme Court. And Roosevelt is always criticized as really wanting to pack the court, right? To put justices that will just let him get away with whatever he wants and do whatever he wants. He never actually does expand the Supreme Court, but that idea and that threat is always kind of around for his entire presidency. And then finally, taking a look at after the New Deal, we have concerns about federal overreach. Even while these programs are taking off and being enacted and voted on, there's concerns that the federal government is overreaching its bounds and its authority. That's something that will continue even after the New Deal, and you can see it even in the modern day, right, with our leftover programs from the New Deal. We still hear that kind of come up a lot, that it's not the federal government's responsibility or it's outside of the scope of the federal government. So that's something that's not new. It's been around since these programs were created. We have questions about the authority of the Supreme Court, how far they can go to strike down something that Congress or the president uh, puts out as a law. Again, something we still hear into the modern era. We actually still continue to have a lack of economic prosperity. His programs do help a little bit, but they do not solve the problem. They do not solve our economic position. They don't really change much of it for us. And so nothing really changes or comes out of that. We get a brand new and tenuous political alliance between white working people, African Americans, and left wing intellectuals. So all of a sudden, these 3 different groups are pushed together to work together because they have a very common interest, right? They all of a sudden have things that they all want and that they all share ideals for. That's not something that we see previously, and it won't stick around for very long after this. But for a short time, it's there. It really unites all 3 of those people or groups of people. And then finally, like we said before, an increase in women in the workforce that will mostly continue on throughout into the modern era. And then finally, a lasting influence of Social Security, unemployment insurance, and agricultural subsidies. Mm, there are so many programs that Roosevelt institutes, and they touch on them in the textbook. You can really get a grasp of how much he does. And majority of those programs are still in effect today in one form or another. Obviously we have Social Security, but the idea of subsidizing farmers and subsidizing agriculture is still around today. And so farmers will get paid by the federal government to produce certain crops over others. And those crops have changed over the years, but that's still an idea that starts here with the New Deal and continues on into our modern era. So with that, that'll bring us to the end of our conversation about the New Deal. Make sure you're reading this chapter. It goes into a lot more detail about these programs I talked about, and especially about Roosevelt himself. So you'll get all that good stuff there. But that'll be it for this lecture. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or pop them into the questions forum. And other than that, I'll see you back here next time.